Today I will show you how to make a traditional German sunken apple cake that has the perfect amount of sweetness and is usually served with a dollop of homemade whipped cream to balance all the flavors. In German, it is called Versunkener Apfelkuchen, and while it does not necessarily fit the green healthy cooking brand, it is the birthday cake that my son requests every single year. I talk about it every single year, and you ask for the recipe every single year. So I figured, why not venture out into the not so super healthy baking realm and share this recipe with you, because it will still be 100 times more healthy than any store-bought cake could ever be. So before we get started, let me teach you some baking lingo. The recipe calls for the same amount of butter and sugar by weight, not volume. So if you don't have a digital scale, that means you need a weird sugar measurement of half a cup plus 1 tablespoon. So you can get the same amount of sugar for your stick or your half cup of butter. Next, the recipe calls for room temperature butter and eggs, which means you have to take the butter and eggs out of the fridge at least an hour before you start baking, maybe even longer if your house is pretty cold. Your butter should give when some pressure is applied, but your knife should not easily slide to the bottom. And no, unfortunately, you cannot speed up the process in the microwave or on the radiator, because your butter will just soften at the top but be still hard in the center. Also, if you add fridge cold eggs to your room temperature butter, you defy the whole purpose of having had it come to room temperature in the first place. It will harden the butter again. I know it's annoying when a recipe calls for room temperature ingredients and we forgot to take them out, but we just got to be patient for the success of this recipe. Now, you will either need a stand mixer or one of those electric hand mixers. Hand mixing is close to impossible for this recipe because creaming butter and sugar will make your arm fall off. Now, with all of this important information ahead, we are now ready to get started. Get a 9-inch baking pan and place it on a piece of parchment paper to trace the bottom. Now cut out the circle about 1/8 of an inch inside of the circle. This way it should fit perfectly into the bottom of your baking pan. Now get about a teaspoon of butter and use your fingers to coat the bottom and sides of the baking pan. Then place the cut out parchment paper circle inside. The butter will help make it stick to the pan. Then set it aside. Now get 4 small apples. Any type of apple will work, but my favorite are Gala apples. Peel them and cut them in half. And then core them, making sure you only remove the actual core, not the whole center of the apple. I'm even using the peeler at the edges to not cut off too much. Then put the apple half with the flat side down on the cutting board and start slicing into it at an angle first and then straight, but only about halfway through, not all the way down. You want the apple half to stay as one piece, not slices. Then cut the apple piece in half so we end up with a quarter apple that has slits all over. At that point, take a half lemon and smother the apple with lemon juice. This is to ensure the apple doesn't brown. Don't squeeze the lemon. We only want a very thin coat of lemon juice on the apple, and only work on 1 apple at the time so you don't peel them all and they oxidize before you even get to the lemon part. Now preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and get your stand mixer out. Add the sugar, the softened butter, and the zest of 1 lemon to the mixing bowl. And then cream the butter and sugar. That means you have to beat it with a paddle attachment on medium speed for a good 3 minutes. Use a spatula 2 to 3 times in between to scrape down the sides. In the end, it's supposed to be pale in color and should look a little like ricotta cheese. Now add 1 egg at a time, mixing on low until the egg is incorporated before adding the next. The batter will look like it curdled. Don't worry, that's normal. Now add the vanilla extract and use a spatula to remove all the batter stuck to the paddle attachment. Then place a sieve on the bowl and add the flour, salt, and baking powder and sift this all into the bowl. Then put the paddle attachment back onto the machine and mix this all on low until the flour is just mixed in. Don't overmix the batter at this point. You can also use a spatula for the last 2 or 3 mixes so the flour is just mixed in and you don't continue beating the batter after that. Now use a spatula to remove all the batter stuck to the paddle attachment and then add it all to your parchment paper lined and buttered baking pan. Distribute the batter evenly and make sure it's all the same height everywhere. Then place the apples on top without pushing them in, just place them on top of the batter all over. Now sprinkle the apples with a tiny bit of raw sugar to counter the acidity of the lemon juice. And if you want your cake to be flat instead of like a dome, I recommend using a cake strip, wetted and from the freezer around the cake pan. I will link to the ones I'm using in the description. Now place the cake in the oven for anywhere from 35 to 40 minutes, and if your oven is one of those that does not bake evenly, then midway take your oven gloves and turn the pan a little bit so it bakes evenly and becomes nice and brown all over. Now in the meantime, we can make our homemade whipped cream for this. For that, add 2 cups of heavy whipping cream, a tablespoon of sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla to the clean bowl of your stand mixer, and then use the whisk attachment to whip the cream on medium speed for about 5 to 7 minutes. Start keeping a close eye and stop the mixer often at around the 5-minute mark to make sure you don't over whip the cream, or else it'll turn into butter. Once the cake is finished baking and the batter is golden, take it out of the oven and place it on a wire rack to cool down at the very least 20 minutes. Then run a knife around the edge and place a plate on top of it and turn it over. Carefully remove the parchment paper and then place your serving plate on the bottom and turn the cake again. Sprinkle with a little more raw sugar if you like, and then cut into this deliciousness. Serve a piece with a dollop of your homemade whipped cream and enjoy. I hope you're going to give this German Sunken apple cake a try for your next special occasion. If you do, please don't forget to snap a picture. I love seeing when you make any of my recipes, and I'll see you with my next video, which will be back to 100% absolutely healthy. Promise. Bye.